Мы сегодня разговаривать с Франсуаз Вержес. Франсуаз Вержес, она независимая исследовательница и деколониальная феминистка. Она много написала статей и книг о памяти рабства, о таких писателях, как Франц Фанон, Эми Сезер, о процессе колониализма и о том, как на самом деле это влияет на музеях тоже, о процессах реализации и о деколониальном феминизме. И сегодня мы будем разговаривать с ней после того, я надеюсь, что вы все слышали ее голосовое сообщение на пара-сайте симпозиума. И мы вместе с Яной Кличук и Алиной Белишкиной, которые тоже являются кураторами этого симпозиума, второго кураторского форума, мы очень рады, что Франсуаз присоединилась. Так что, может, Франсуаз сделает пару слов, чтобы делать какое-то введение к дискуссии, и мы начнем с вопросами вашими. Спасибо большое.
Now to me, right? Well, good evening, and thank you very much for this invitation. So, quickly, of course, perhaps some of you have listened to the podcast, or my interest, as a curator and in relation with the world of art and museum is how do we decolonize this institution, how do we decolonize art history, how we decolonize practice, and also how we depatriarchalize it. We take away the patriarchy from them, the structure, the patriarchal structure. And I do that through decolonial visit in museums, through organization of workshops, through roundtable, and decolonial visit like the one I was planning to do if coming to St. Petersburg would have been possible, which means to take an institution as it is and not to ask it to change, but to see when we go there how we can have a decolonial gaze on what it is. So we don't ask things to be changed, but how we decolonize our own gaze, how we decolonize our own visit and our own body. And this, the question of decolonial, so for me, it's of course not about independence only, but the long process of decolonization of mind, of epistemologies, of way of writing, of temporalities and spatiality, is to reject the idea of that we have, areas of civilization and culture in the way that it was divided after World War II. It's also, I'm very interested in the circulation that escaped nation state, how, through people, through merchant, pilgrim, women would travel. Very much for me was, from a small island in the Indian Ocean, for South-South connection, circulation of ideas, of images, of sounds that escape economic or geopolitical organization of the world, how things are constantly escaping. So there is more and more work being done, but in the art, it's remained nonetheless, content with African, even if it's contemporary African art or Asian contemporary art or things like that, and not so much about the circulation, although there is more and more work on that now, but nonetheless, it's still. I'm also, so the question of transversality, transnational is really at the heart of my practice. It's against also how do I am careful about extractivism, about, using stories or situation as a source of extraction for academic work or artistic work. So this is very much what I try to do. And we can discuss, I can give some example as we have a discussion. But this, I grew up in a place where you did not have museum, on your island there was no museum, there was no history. But I've always been interested in that side. And Benedict Anderson, who wrote Imagine Community, wrote that the two pillars of the nation state are printing and the museum. So the museum, whether you go or you do not go, contribute to the certain hegemonic narrative and history, or a certain representation. And it has been neglected quite a lot in that role, the role that the museum play, because it's looked at as effectively an elitist, class-based, gender-based, and it's true institution, but still not the way in which it disseminates ideas and representations through the society. So museum represent for me a very important, very interesting place to examine how hegemonic narrative, how history. I mean, to give you just a very a small example, you know, how effectively we don't see even what is under our own eyes, you know, that which is there. Just, you know, like a month ago, I was having a meeting with curators and art historian of Le Louvre, so the big museum of the French museum, the French temple of art. So, it's about how slavery appears in 17th century painting on. And one of the first painting is from a Dutch painter who went to Brazil when the northeast of Brazil was a Dutch colony. His name is Frans Post, and it was in the early 17th century. And he came back with a series of paintings that then were given to the King of France, Louis XIV, for whatever. Well, it's not very important. But the point is, they are very big painting, very big, and they represent plantation, sugar cane plantation, slave plantation. And discussing about it, so I had chosen them because they are they are really very good representation. And discussing with curators, because they are the one who will accept that I can do this visit or not. They will validate, scientifically validate. And he told me, but they are landscape. This painter is known in art history for painting landscape. He's a paysagiste, as they say in France. And I said, but that's what is interesting, that slavery became a landscape, that it's an exotic landscape. So that when I see it, I see effectively plantation with some black people, and I don't ask myself, but why do we have black people in Brazil in 17th century? How come? I mean, Brazil is not in Africa. And I don't even see the plantation. I see a landscape, a beautiful, exotic landscape with black people dressed and there, and why not? I mean, they have the right to be on the painting. And it was a long discussion, and the curators were absolutely, they repeated over and over that I was instrumentalizing the painting, and that I was putting an interpretation that was, you know, abusive interpretation on that. And that was very interesting because this was in, you know, this year, 2020, and I realized that no progress has been made since the 1990s, when there was, emerging interest in slavery and art in France. Absolutely, like no progress has been done. And so even though we could see that the painting was about a plantation, a slave plantation, and we could see that it was, did not matter. So it was not that so I'm not working necessarily on what is hidden or made invisible. So not so much in this visible and visibility binary organization, which also matter, but also what is seen and not seen. And so this almost, you know, so we could enter even almost psychoanalytical interpretation of, you know, the famous Scarlet Letter is there, but you don't see it. And so what is, you know, what is happening in terms of process of repression, of you know, like effectively, and can this return, I mean, the return of the oppressed, how this is been working. And I have a lot of other examples. A second example, very quickly, was when I went also for work for some guided visit in the museum, where is a museum near Paris, like 1 hour from Paris. It's where Napoleon and his wife, Joséphine de Beauharnais, they lived for many years. And it's, of course, it's a museum, you know, celebrating the emperor. And on the last floor, it's the reconstitution of the room when he was in exile in St. Helena, when the English sent him in this island. And this is a very small island, as you may know, lost in the Atlantic, very difficult to reach by boat. And it's very recently, like 10, 20 years ago, that it's easy to land on that island. But anyway, and so I was visiting with a curator and the director of the museum, and I realized that I'm in this famous bedroom where Napoleon lived and died, and there was a lot of Chinese furniture. And so I asked, why do we have Chinese furniture? I mean, was Napoleon interested in Chinese furniture? They say no. Just say, did he bring it with him? No. So where did he find it? In St. Helena. I said, why do you have Chinese furniture in 19th century St. Helena? Like that, like Napoleon did not shop, there. They did not go to the, some Chinese shop to pick up some furniture. And they say, we don't know. And this has been done for decades now, right? This room, this bedroom. And so it was there. And nobody had wondered why you had Chinese furniture in the bedroom of Napoleon. So when I went home, of course, I look at it and I discovered that the English has brought Chinese indenture worker from China, from miles away, absolutely miles away. And that on the island when Napoleon arrived, the majority of the population was these Chinese indenture workers and enslaved people from Madagascar and Africa. And this disappeared. So again, it was there and it could be invisible. It could be hidden, even though. So that's what I try to work quite a lot. So not to avoid also to fall into a logic of compensation and filling the void, something that's lacking. And so we're going to fill the void. And to work also from what is there and what can we see that is on the painting or in the furniture, in what we are shown, and has been naturalized or normalized so that we don't see. So that for me is part of the decolonial practice and methodology that I try to develop when I do workshop or guided visit or, all the different work I do. It's always to take seriously a question, for instance, the question of reparation. So what is reparation in the world of art, from that repairing painting to the famous practices of repair in Japan, but also what is to repair? What is how the museum can contribute to the reparation of a society under capitalism and racism and sexism. So how these artists can contribute to the politics of reparation today. How this can work against sexism and racial capitalism today. So this is really, and it's something I do, and but that is dynamic. So I don't have like this 1, 2, 3. This is how you're going to do it. It's also part of the what is certainly present to yourself. So to include also the unexpected, what emerge in a question, in something, and that's how we will be ready, because I always work collectively. We will be ready to accept that enforcing unexpected part and then react to it. Answer to it. So it's a very open, I would say, dynamic method that I try to imagine and develop. And it's always about how can I say, unlearn to learn, if I can use that expression, to unlearn, so to learn again, to learn anew, and to again to use a lot of many senses, not just to look, but also how we can, all the other senses can be, and the body and the voice can be also contribute to that practice. And I think Joanna told me to keep it too short, so I keep it short.
Joanna, are you here? Let's maybe start with the questions.
Yes. Я могу начать. У меня вопрос очень конкретный и частный. И он имеет отношение к вашему голосовому сообщению. Франсуаз, большое спасибо за него. Вот в вашем голосовом сообщении вы видите связь между неолиберализмом и некоторыми видами западного феминизма, которые создали определенный вокабуляр или новый словарь эмансипации, который на самом деле, как вы говорите, не слишком эмансипирующий, да, и по сути империалистский. И вот я думаю, можем ли мы назвать эти некоторые виды западного феминизма колониалистскими по сути? И что конкретно вы имеете в виду под этими некоторыми видами западного феминизма? Я поясню, почему я спрашиваю, потому что дело в том, что, живя в России, до сравнительно недавних пор источники знания о феминизме у нас были англоязычные. То есть в большинстве случаев отсылали к англоязычным авторам. Ну, мы все их знаем: Донна Хаraway, Джудит Батлер, Сара Ахмед, да, и так далее. И я не уверена, что когда вы говорите о западном феминизме как о неолиберальном явлении, вы имеете в виду именно это направление мысли, да, на которое я сейчас ссылаюсь. Поэтому мне было бы очень интересно подумать с вами вместе и услышать ваше мнение о том, какие именно феминистские практики, на ваш взгляд, являются неолиберальными.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Well, there is a genealogy of absolutely bourgeois, white, liberal feminism in Europe, not just in France, in Europe, that was for colonization, was racist, that could imagine, for instance, the anti-slavery feminism in 18th century, 19th century Europe was against slavery, but not for equality. The question of equality, that was something that, you know, that stopped there. It could not be full equality. And European feminism was also very much for the civilizing mission, thought that feminism could contribute to civilize the non-white people. So this is still very strong and still, you know, very, quite present in the European Parliament, in international institutions, in state feminism. This is still, you know, this idea of a civilizing mission of feminism. And that it is true that by the 1990, but really by the 2000, women's rights understood in the Western sense became extremely important in imperialist policy. We can even perhaps even remember Bush talk when declaration when they launched the war, when the US launched the war against Afghanistan, and say that it was also to save Afghan women from, you know, oppression and being veiled. And then we could also talk about the foundation, the intervention of foundation in Africa, in Asia, in the Caribbean, in South America, birth control, all the term of empowering, you know, woman capacity building. I mean, all this vocabulary that is really, you know, a vocabulary of neutralizing, pacifying women's struggle, women feminist struggle. So when I say that, and of course I will know about Sarah Ahmed, but Sarah I will not consider her as a Western feminist to begin with. But you quoted Donna Haraway. And Donna Haraway has an article about making kin, not family, in which she, you know, argued that the question of family being patriarchal and so on, and what is more important. I mean, you know the piece. And then, you know, when I thought about, I mean, when I read the article and I was working on the question of, you know, what is family and what is kinship. And I was reminded, I mean, I reminded myself that for a lot of people are forbidden to make family. Not in the sense the patriarchal family, but to have a family unit slavery, colonialism, but even today, for instance, in Western state, I don't know for Russia, but in Western state, the state can intervene in a family because it's a Muslim family, it's a Black family, it's a poor family, can intervene and say, this is not the good family, the good family. So there was an image, so I thought that Donna Haraway, when she was saying that, she did not pay attention enough to the other history, to the history of Black and brown women and Black and brown men who had been forbidden, are still forbidden to make family. And that the idea of the family is always, okay, the father, the mother, the two children, the dog and the cat. But you still have a lot of family that are not organized this way. Even in Europe, for instance, among the migrant community or the non-white community, people descendant of North African or Sub-Saharan African migrants who establish themselves. And so this we have to be careful. What I mean, like feminists, white feminists have to be careful about when they criticize a notion that is effectively, right away we say, of course, family. You think right away about the patriarchal family with the domestic tyrant, the father who impose and beat the wife and beat the mother, the daughter and the son, or the son oppressing the daughter. And we don't pay attention to other kind of family that, in fact, were center of resistance, were very important to resist racist society. And that you will have Black feminists in the US talking about the family as a unit of resistance. So, which does not mean that they're going to celebrate, the monogamous family, whatever, but that they have also to understand that family is not in itself, the abstract thing of oppression. You have different organizations. So that's an example. So it's for me effectively not emancipatory. This feminism, this civilizing feminism, this feminism which contribute to neoliberalism, to imperialism, or to state feminism, who want equality between women and men, but not asking who are the men we want to be equal to. Usually it's not really, the poor workers, right? I mean, the idea right away is the man who is, in fact, has a status, as a certain, wealth. So this, and for instance, it's also a feminism. One of the things that interests me a lot and which has been working is, the work of cleaning, who clean the world. And the clean, and that in this feminism, this bourgeois feminism, there is erasure of the world in which we live is made possible because thousands of women every morning or late at night clean that place. The yoga room, the gym place, the daycare where the kids are dropped, the shopping, the restaurant, the offices, whatever, the hospital, whatever, everything, the university where we teach, the art school where we go, the museum we visit has been clean. And so this pyramidal organization that made a certain way of life possible, and I'm not talking about just, the rich people, I'm talking about, that any of us circulate. And so for me, the feminism, and I will say that for me, Sarah, with, kind of fuck you feminism is really close to me. And Donna Haraway, it's very interesting. I mean, I'm very interested in her work, but sometimes I do think that she's nonetheless, she remains North. I don't know if I will say Western, but North, belonging to the North, not to the North in a geographical notion, but to the North that forget that the possibility of the North to exist rests on the incredible extractivism and exploitation of the South and part of the North. So yes, that feminism for me, which became quite hegemonic by the 2000s, because it became supported, it became financed by international institutions much more than in the 70s, 80s. And it became, most of this, IMF, World Bank, Gates Foundation, you have gender always. There was always a chapter about gender. There was always a claim that we are working for gender equality. So my question was also, how come feminism, which for long was an insult you know, if you're a feminist, it's like, you know, you don't love men or whatever, and you're ugly or whatever, has become something that in fact can be adopted by state, by international foundation, by neoliberalism and by imperialism. And so we have to circulate also between a patriarchy today that, that we can see with the former president of the United States or the current president of Brazil or the president of Russia, whatever, you know, the macho man, you know, the macho, homophobic, sexist, racist man. And then you will have the president of France with young, you know, finish his sentences, open the door for the woman. And I even married an older woman, whereas all these guys, you know, married younger women. And so, but we have to be careful, you know, it's kind of like patriarchy with a soft face and patriarchy with an ugly face. But in both sense, it's still patriarchy. So, and state feminism, that feminism support a soft liberal patriarchy, is in bed with this patriarchy. And women's rights have become very much more so a weapon in the end. This kind of women's right, not the women's right for liberation, but this kind of the question of equality, not questioning the fact that race and gender and sexuality, you know, the discrimination against queer, trans, sex workers, women, whatever, goes through this question of equality, and that we have to rethink equality and that feminism. So this is a feminism of who, or there was perhaps they are not. We don't read them, and they are not read in a gender department or feminist department in the university, and we don't read them. But they are quite powerful in terms of ideology and in terms of influencing policies. I read quite a lot of this literature from the IMF and the World Bank and the Foundation, which is, you know, of course, it's not as exciting as reading Sarah Ahmed or Sadia Hartman or Bell Hooks, but they are important to read. They finance a lot of things, perhaps less in Europe, but a lot in Asia, Africa, South America, and the Caribbean. So they are powerful in influencing women's life.
Thank you.
Joanna, you're muted.
Do we have other questions?
I was just interested in the workshops that you mentioned in your voice message, the workshops that you were organizing with Decolonialism les Arts. You briefly mentioned that in some of the workshops that you did in universities and maybe other contexts. Like you, for example, noticed that there is a difficulty to think outside of the Western perspective, which I'm interested in your experience in these workshops. Can you maybe explain different contexts, how you organize, and what was the learning process or the workshop process?
Okay, thank you. Well, there were a workshop I did outside of Decoloniser les Arts, of decolonizing the art, and then some I did. Okay, for instance, again, you know, the principle of the workshop was to try to escape a certain expectation or certain norms in which we fall practically naturally without thinking, because we are used to them. So the workshop, for instance, one of the workshops I did with what was between 20 and 30 young artists of color in France. You're only artists of color. And so I was picking up a theme and then suggesting some text around that theme and then suggesting what we will do. And this were, how can I say, like detail, I mean, some information, but what we will do out of that was not given. It will be done when we are doing it. So to give you a concrete example, although it's totally abstract, the last one I did was called War, Peace and Water. And the thing was because water was being criminalized in Europe, in France especially, but also in Italy, by the fact that if you are giving water to a migrant, you were accomplice to the smuggler. You were helping the migrant, and so therefore being a criminal, because it's a crime to smuggle, to be. So that criminalization of water, really, I said to myself, well, that's interesting, because, giving water is really a human gesture, right? Someone is like, you give a glass of water, it's really, I mean, the most human things. So I was interested in this criminalization. I was also interested in the privatization of water everywhere. The fact, drinking water is being privatized, so you cannot drink tap water in most parts of the world. And now it has to be plastic bottle. The war around water, the privatization even of the sea, the transformation of the sea into private territory, the kind of private property, the laws of private property arriving on seas, on river, the question of pollution. So this was, the question of water. And also water as very present in rituals and of oppressed people, and also bodies of water as connecting people. Being from the Indian Ocean, it's really like Africa and Asia connecting long before the European arrived in this ocean. Long before. The European arrived in 15th century, and in between Asia and Africa, you have had already connection, since, the 5th century or BC or whatever. Anyway, so that was the water, the question of water. And then, so the war and peace, and so connected with that, the peace is like the peaceful gesture of offering water, but also why has peace become just the interlude between two wars. War is a natural order, and peace is the exceptional moment. And peace is this moment that, men around the table will agree upon and sign an agreement of peace. But peace is not considered as the permanent state, and war being the exceptional. And so you have war on drugs, war on the virus, war on migrant, war on terror, and war and real war. I mean, real war, these are wars. So how do we think peace as peacefulness, as a necessity for some peacefulness? And I remember reading also some testimony by migrants or by people during the World War II escaping Nazism or escaping, and how they were describing when they felt safe, and then they slept, they had a different rest. The rest was full. They were not, like that, sleeping like that. So the idea of, that peacefulness, the necessity. So when you put your head on the pillow, you really sleep, and even you dream. So this was, different connection. So I offer some texts by on peace, war, and water. And then I suggested 3 groups. One was the Amazon. The group of women who think that you have to organize war, you have to train as soldier because you have to fight, because there is a war going on, so you have to learn. There was a group of the migrants who were the keepers of water, who were wandering and keeping the water, saving the water from, from all the destruction. And then you had the Cassandra, who were warning everyone of the catastrophe to come, and therefore, of course, nobody was listening to them. But so that was, the frame. And then the 3 groups were told to do whatever they wanted from that. Those who choose to be with the Cassandra group, and Cassandra was only women, who choose to be with in the Cassandra group. Practically spontaneously. There was an Amazon, and there was a migrant. The migrant was the most mixed group. The Amazon was a lot of women. A lot of women chose to be in the Amazon group. A lot of women chose to be in the Cassandra. There was no men. In the Amazon, there was some men. And the migrant was a more mixed, so like that. And so the point is, then after we went to the to a cemetery, because war is also about the dead. We walk around in the forest. I mean, we did different things for, so the Friday evening we meet together. The Saturday we do that. We wander, we discuss, but each group was organizing their own performance. And then on the Sunday we met again, and it's always the principle of the smallest economy possible. We don't spend money, as little as possible. So if we need something, we ask each other, do you have it at home? Do you have something, you know, that we can bring for the performance? We try to keep the money that I got for food and drinks and have fun. And so the last day we did the performance, and the performance, I mean, we did it in Chiasma, which is a place that artist and writer Olivier Marbeuf created near Paris. And each group did not say to each other what they are prepared, but just say, I will need that corner, or I will need to go through the room at one point. And then the last thing is that the second day we open the place to the public. We open the performance to the public. Whatever has been done, we stop at 5 p.m. and we open it to the public. So there was a certain norm, I mean, time, you know, is that the space, that's set up, the little economy also, that's our the principle. And so it's a very collaborative work, because it's not the photographer, the dancer, the actor or actress together. It's really the energy together to try to, can we do a performance, a collective collaborative performance from these different you know, elements. So the principle of collaboration and collectivity is very important, and also to have fun. And so we had a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun. So that was possible. And the only moment, because I did 4 this workshop, one was on utopia, one was on the war peace, and another one was about organizing the imagining the post-colonial space. But, and the only moment of conflict we had were with academics that who wanted something very almost, you know, respectable, and we you know, it's not a diploma, it's not for a diploma, it's for, I mean, we don't need a jury here, you know, we don't need to know you're great, we don't care. So that was that. But what you're talking about also, this difficulty was more about imagining the Decolonial Museum. If we were given the task of imagining a museum, let's say about migration or about what will we do? And this was in last year. And by the second, so there was a workshop once a month. And by the second workshop, I realized that most of the proposals, you know, the discussion and the proposition, we're turning against, we will not do that. And it was always taking the example from, you know, Western, Euro-centered museum. And I say, but that's, we cannot imagine, we are constantly, you know, stuck to the model. And so we react, we are constantly reacting. And so, for instance, I was saying, so there was a museum of migration in France, and they say, so all the people, we were like 80 people, 80 to 100 people working on that. That say, well, we will change the entrance. And I say, but why do we think that we will take that building? Why can't we imagine that, you know, the architecture of the Decolonial Museum? Why do we take what exists already and we cannot imagine what will be the architecture? Because I say the architecture is as important as what we do inside. It's not, you know, that once, because the architecture always give a message, or always translate a hierarchy. So how do we think that? And so I realized the strengths of the Western model, that the fact that it's a reaction rather than imagination, and that the leap into the imagination is the most difficult things. And I understand why, I'm not judging, But this is what I'm trying, constantly working on, this leap on imagination, and even getting wide, you know, imagining, and then after we can see what can be done or not. But doing that, giving us the freedom to do that, the desire to do that, not to be constrained. This is what most, you know, of decolonial thinkers talk about, have been talking about for decades. You know, this, what, to resume, the, you know, the black skin, white mask, or the woman who want to be like a man. I mean, all these things, you know, how do you escape? And how do you look at practices that are already offering this alternative? Because they are there, but sometimes outside in the margin, in the dust. So how do we look at them? And this is why, for instance, a workshop in French is l'atelier. And it's so when you say that, but workshop also in English, it's also, it's not just the atelier of the artist. It's not a workshop of the artist, the atelier, which is a studio in English. But in French, it's the same term, but it's also for craft people. And in the craft pedagogy, there is a lot of imitation, repetition. The question of time is not the same. If you want to learn how to carve wood, you're not going to do that in like that. And it's not art history about, you know, carving wood that will help only. It will be also learning, repetition, imitation, learning to do it. The question of time, of temporality is different also in that. The question of collaboration, of collective living is very important. And so that's also for me a model to draw from, to look at, and to constantly ask ourselves, what is the temporality we are choosing by doing that? So for instance, escaping the Western model is also not saying 17, 18, 19, 20th, 21st century, but perhaps other temporality that we can discover and, you know, focus on. What kind of spatiality also, you know, what are the space? And so it's a constant work, and sometimes with very modest objective. But this constant work to denormalize also, to denaturalize what is being given as natural and normal. So to constantly exercise our curiosity.
Thank you very much. Are there other questions from the participants? Then I'll ask one, maybe. I'm really sorry. Ah, yes, go for it. Go for it.
Okay, I have a lot, but maybe I will just pick one. You just mentioned having fun while working, and that made me think of the beautiful thing you said about emancipation in your voice message. You said that emancipation is a collective adventure. And it sounds so beautiful, and it is so beautiful, but at the same time, for me, it's a bit upsetting, because it implies, or maybe that's how I understand it, it implies that in order to emancipate, we need to become collective first. We need to unite first. And it seems that, you know, it's not getting any easier to do that these days. So what are the tools, what are the practicalities, you know, for uniting, for becoming together these days, in your opinion?
Well, we will have already to see what we want to accomplish, what kind of unity we want to accomplish. And it might depend on context. It might, you know, like at that moment, that the kind of unity we need, at another moment, it's not. We have also to see that unity is not uniformity. It's not, you know, I mean, the hierarchical party with the leaders talking and everyone following. The collective has really a body, but a body that is not is the collective body, which means that it's not effectively the brigade or, you know, the kind of armed unity, but effectively with the conflictual, the kind of conflict that can emerge, and sometimes really friction, difficult friction that can emerge, and the difficulty to overcome. A lot of movement. I mean, yesterday I have been, you know, in a lot of collective and, you know, activist group, and how we have to overcome so many conflict constantly, conflict around recognition. It's terrible, because with individualism, the need to be recognized, the need to be, you know, an individual, and that individual means almost on exclusivity. You know, it's based on the exclusivity rather than, so it's very difficult. I mean, you see that in a lot of social science and art, whatever, or humanities, you have to make your name. You have to brand yourself. It's very rarely that your name will be with other. Which is different from, you know, in science, you know, life, whatever, where an article would be signed by 20 people, right? So that idea of a collective, of a, you know, how to work around, it's a difficult, it's almost day-to-day practice, I will say, and sometimes it fails, quite often it fails. It cannot fail, you know, and so you will have to imagine another one, because we cannot underestimate the incredible difficulty of creating a collective in a world where individualism is, you know, the most important thing, you know, to be this individual, an individual, you know, like a person, without the fact that I can reinvent myself, and I can invent myself constantly outside of any origin, outside of any culture. And that this desire for being free from a lot of, you are of this origin, this is your culture, you should obey that, you should be loyal to that. This desire to emancipate oneself from all oppressive royalties and oppressive has been very important. But there is a way in which it's then slide towards pure individualism. I, myself and myself, me and my and myself, you know? And that is that, so the constant circulation between effectively being, realizing that, oh my God, I've been caught into that, or I have integrated laws and norms that are not, in fact, that great, right? It's not that I'm without norms, but norms that are oppressive for me or are oppressing other people, and I have to detach myself from that. But at the same time, the fact that the collective for me is more when you were saying having fun. It's a lot, you know, having fun, and I don't have. I mean, this is me. I don't have a lot of fun by myself only, you know. I have more fun when with people, with, you know, having, and I like this sociability that, you know, based on fun and friendship. I mean, friendly. I mean, we're not necessarily friendship, you know. But for me, that collective can be just like dinner among friends and having a lot of fun and you know, laughing a lot. But I will say that emancipation is always collective, because then you realize that it's not about you only. It's a structure. You know, it's not me. It's not me because no. It's a structure also in which I'm caught, and in which the fact that I'm a woman, I'm Black, or, you know, gay or lesbian or queer or trans will, you know, add to the oppression and discrimination. But at the same time, I'm not alone. I'm not alone because it's a structure. It's not me, Françoise, who is, you know, the victim because they don't like my face. I mean, perhaps also, perhaps that matter. But it's part of that. And so to fight against, I have to find other women who share, or men who share that, and fight with them. And then also because in a collective, I think you are challenged. you're challenged and you're stimulated. Your mind is stimulated because someone says something, say, oh yes, I did not think it that way. Oh, that's true. I never considered that. I never, pay attention to that. So it's also an intellectual and affective stimulation that open us to different things. And so we are not. But again, I don't underestimate the difficulty of creating a collective and making a collective a place for life and affectivity and possibility. So I don't underestimate the ego thing, the narcissistic thing, the desire for recognition. It's a constant work, and sometimes it's a difficult work. It's a very difficult work, yeah. It's a very, and the way in which recognition is based on exclusivity work also a lot against collective. I have seen right now, for instance, we are trying to create a collective, decolonial art / feminist / whatever collective. And it's not that easy. It's not that easy. It's not that easy because also we can be caught in the daily demand, of life, and which are taking more and more time, and life becoming also more difficult, economically more difficult, and socially more difficult. It's not, so this also play. It's not just the collective, it's also the stress, the pressure. Right now with the pandemic, it's where are we going? What's going on? So it's also, it creates a stressful environment, and that play a role. So I would say there was the psychic life of neoliberalism, sexism, and racism is impact creation of collective, but the collective, the collective that work for emancipation can also develop a psychic life that for its member will be helpful. That you will find in the collective some relief, some source of hope and possibility, the possibility that then the society seems to in fact, no, there is no, the famous Margaret Thatcher, there is no alternative. And offering the fact that, yes, you do have alternative. Their alternatives have always existed. And what is, in terms of the financing, I will want to say about the collective, what always impressed me, and I'm very admirative of that, is the fact that in any police state, dictatorship, terrible situation, you always had women and men who stood up and made the way of getting out of this possible. So becoming that possibility was not part of the science fiction or some world in whatever in some planet, but on this earth was possible. That's a collective idea. Not many questions, apparently.
Me,
Dear
I have a lot.
participants, write them down because you don't want to ask them directly. But maybe we'll wait just a bit if someone wants to ask a question. Bon, Alina, go for it then.
Okay, one more question from me. In response to my first question, you mentioned cleaning as a practice. And a while ago, I read your text about cleaning and care as emancipatory practices. So I wonder, maybe we can also speak about that. And as far as I remember, in that text, you say that cleaning and care are emancipatory practices that can also repair the society. So I'm specifically interested in that possibility of repairing the society through cleaning. I mean, I can understand how or I think I can understand how it can be realized by care, but through cleaning. To me, this is also interesting to be discussed, and maybe we'll have more questions from the audience in relation to that.
Well, thank you. Thank you. That's a great question. And if I had been able to come, I would have liked to discuss that. Well, repairing is caring, as you say, we get it. We get what is to care. But for me, there is no caring without cleaning, and no cleaning without caring. Cleaning is also taking care, right? But more than that, capitalism around the world, not in this place, whatever, is a producer of waste, produce a lot of waste. Because in the production, what is produced every day, a big part of these goods will be thrown right away, will not even be sold, right? So the idea that we have about waste, that is what is being consumed and then what is left over is being thrown, or what, because it's old or whatever, it's wrong. A big part of the production is not to be consumed, because it's part of effectively the fabrication of profit and so on. So the Earth, the planet, to repair the planet today in which we live, and we know is being very much damaged in the living condition of plants, animals, and first human being. The reparation cannot be just about caring. It will be how we're going to clean, how we're going to clean the world. How do we going to clean the world from the amount of waste that is being, thrown out every day? I mean, the mountain, rivers, lake, seas, land are being, absolutely saturated. What I call waste is not just, what you find in the dumping place. It's also the plastic. It's also all the chemical that we inject that, in the body. The fact that the reparation of the damage produced by this production of chemicals, that even children now are born differently. I mean, their body are different, where they are different from people born 30 years ago, when you had less of these chemicals. What we eat, so how all this saturation, the fact that the life, the world, the living life is saturated by what is being produced for profit and not for the well-being. So how are we going to clean this? How are we going to have again, for instance, if we look at the Mediterranean, and this is one of the most polluted sea in the world, one of the most polluted, but also it's the sea where you have the most of dead people today, that, all the African who drown, and also Syrian or people from Somalia or Eritrea who drown in the Mediterranean, and who bodies are transformed into, are eaten by the fish and are now in the water, particle of the water. But it's also the place where the most Europeans go for their vacation, for, having. And so the vacation, the Mediterranean area of the vacation is an image of fun, of nice, beautiful, with olive tree and beautiful beaches and beautiful, sun, and so clean, a certain cleanliness of that, a certain image of, where we're going to have a beautiful summer and beautiful memories. But this is hide. I don't know if it's hide. Yes, it does, because when you go swimming in the Mediterranean, you don't have in mind the fact that you're swimming amongst particles of bodies, of dead bodies and plastic, So to clean the sea, to remain on this example, will not mean only to take away all the plastic particles, to make it less polluted. It will mean also to mean that it's no longer a sea, a death, a cemetery for Black and brown body. repairing the Mediterranean will mean effectively to make it less polluted, less have this crazy cruise ships, which mean also transformation of the economy of what is, consumption, the kind of hyper consumption, the economy of the port, of the pollution, the economy of, all the pesticides that are falling, but also the economy of death that has been produced by the policy of Europe against migrants. And also, again, the pollution that represents the kind of mass tourism that has transformed the coast of Spain or Greece or Italy in absolutely, totally ugly things, covered with things. And so what has this meant also for the land? So if we are just taking the Mediterranean, will mean all the coast around, like the far. It will be taken, for me, it's always, if I look at one thing, did I really pull all the thread? Like that weave, that thing that ended up by being called polluted Mediterranean or spend your summer in the Mediterranean, if I'm taking these two things. And if I take these two things, and I know they are the same place, right? They are not there and over there, it's the same place. And I look at them and I say, okay, how, and I think about repairing, and how do I do it so I don't look at just one aspect? So for instance, less polluted, so it will be better for the European when they come and they swim and their children are there, so at least they are not in a polluted water, right? And they don't eat polluted food. It's good, olives and tomatoes and cucumber. And if I just remain that, I don't see the whole, how the pollution is not just about the plastic in the sea, but if I pull all the thread, and I look how that has been constructed as a white place for fun and summer, but then a place of death and pollution, hyper-consumption, and all the rest, sexualized also, whether, you have the sex workers in some of the place in the Greek island, or then the children transform into sex workers in North Africa. I mean, all this, how do I keep all this thread together? So repair is about cleaning for caring, because the both are two things. And then also, it's not about just greenwashing, if I may say. It's not just about ecology looked by just one aspect, but how I see they are connected in a way, perhaps not in a cause, and consequences, but that, as I say, if I just clean the Mediterranean, so there is no longer plastic in the Mediterranean, it will still be a cemetery, or a place like that, or the kind of hyper-consumption through mass tourism, or through a very rich, wealthy tourism also that we know exists also in some part of Greece or Portugal or Spain or the Canary. So I don't cut things, but I look at all the pieces and I see how they are connected either directly or indirectly, because this connect like that and do some echoes. And how do I repair? So it will mean it's as if a body, a living body, and you're sick, and we are sick, for instance. We do know that it's not just about applying something on the wound, for instance, but will be also about our mind. And are we, for instance, in a place that is clean? Do I have access to good food and good water? So that this will, the scar will be different than if I live in a polluted place. So it's how do I take this, as effectively as much as a totality, which doesn't mean totalitarian, but as a totality that effectively connect all the question of cleaning as caring and caring as cleaning together. I don't know if I answer your question.
Absolutely. And you know what my mother always says, that I need to keep my house clean, and I clean it every day in order to keep mental health, in order to remain safe.
Yeah, and it's very, you know, because in my activism has been a lot, and I grew up in a very poor country. The care that people, you know, in very poor place, the care that people take into creating a home that has an aesthetic, and about caring and cleaning, that is their place, is extraordinary. So we do see that, you know, cleaning and caring contribute to effectively. It's also can be also a source of resistance to the dirtiness that is produced and created, and the inhospitality of a city. Cities are inhospitable to women. You cannot, you know, walk at 3 a.m. in the morning, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Inhospitable to migrant, inhospitable to refugee, to people with handicap, to sex workers, to Black people, to Muslim people, to women with children. I mean, try in Paris to go to the subway with the children, in a pram. I mean, you know, and if you have some handicap, try. It's incredible. So that's also part, and at the same time, the city is presented as clean. It's a clean Paris, you know, romantic city, blah blah blah. But this cleanliness is artificial. You know, it's really.
I hope that, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to add, thank you so much for this very clear answer. Yeah, I don't have my camera on because my internet is very bad. Sorry. Because you wrote extensively also on the cleaning of big megapolises and the fact that brown and Black exhausted bodies would clean a city for then white healthy people to go on to work, etc. While cleaning meaning is a work as well, but a different type of work that is naturalized and visibilized. And to come back to the idea also of the museum, I was wondering, you know, the kind of epitome of the modern museum in the white cube that was theorized by Alfred Barr and the MoMA. And so to think about this white space that is a bit outside of society and how the space is also cleaned and the cleaning of this space is made completely invisible. And I was wondering whether you had examples of museums or museum teams that work together to deconstruct and think about the presence of the cleaning people in the museum itself. I have an example of the Casco Art Institute in Utrecht, in which they have trying to apply this idea of the Grand Domestic Revolution, also theorized by, for instance, Silvia Federici. Yeah. And I was thinking that maybe you have other examples of taking cleaning seriously as part of taking care of the museum, taking care of the displaying space.
Mm-hmm. I don't have a lot of examples, I have to say. Even like recently, I am on the board of the Art Cultural Center in Paris, and there was discussion about reworking the team and how the team should work better. So there were some advice being given and some rules being given, which were okay, you know, about diversity, blah, blah, blah. There was not a word about the cleaning team. Like not. The place was thought as already being it's there, you know, it has already been clean. And then in this clean place, we will pay attention to have diversity. So it's very important to bring in that question, that the fact that you cannot have the hidden basement where you have the cleaning people, and then above you will have the beauty and the potential. So but no, I will say, I mean, the museum, the idea of the museum as, you know, effectively the white space, the clean space, with the work behind it made invisible, is still very, very strong. We will need a revolution in the sense of attacking the sexist, racist, male-dominated structure of the museum, which still, you know, remain quite powerful. but the fact that for me, you know, I always ask people when I go to the museum, who are the people who you know, who are the guards? Usually, you know, men of color, and then sometimes women in the gallery. And they are, you know, bodies that are there standing for hours, invisible. I mean, totally. And in Pompidou Metz here in France, in the Pompidou Center, which was established in Reims, there was directed by the direction some months ago, forbidding these people to sit. You know, those who are in the gallery to sit, because then if the public enter the room and see people sitting, it will not play very well. You know, it will look out while they are not working. So also, so the union intervened, and apparently it was. But the idea that was that, and it did not even produce a very strong protest from the artists who are being shown at the Pompidou Center in Metz, really was a symptom, I think, of this invisibilization that you're talking about. That there will be more protest and demand for inclusivity in the museum, in the sense that the artists or the team are, you know, more diverse, but there will be very little thing about the structure itself. I mean, the material structure, as you were saying, you know, the architecture, that the social architecture of the institution, not just who is on the walls and who is. No, very little, because I do think that cleaning, and I do see, for instance, because I follow some strike of cleaning women in the hotel, even in the world of work, you know, in the world of the union, in the thinking, in the ideology, cleaning work has never been a very central field of action by a union. And I'm not talking about France only, you know, I mean, I know that also, for instance, in the United States or in Brazil, the fight that to see it as a field of work is a field of you have the greater sexual harassment, the greater sexual violence, and incredible exploitation. And also because the work is not seen as a work in which you deploy intelligence, you know, it's seen as you any stupid person can clean, which is not true. We know that it's not true at all. But that also contributes to the invisibility. So in making the work visible is not just to recognize the work and to make it so better paid and better protected, is also to show that it's a field when your intellect is also being, you know, solicited. And that's one of the most difficult things, because most of people will recognize that this work needs to be better valued and better paid, and you know, not such a site of exploitation, but in thinking that is a work that is indispensable to life, to social life, and therefore absolutely central and requiring intelligence and requiring investment in it. Because the women I talk to who are cleaning, I mean, cleaning workers, they tell you how much they want to do their work well, how much pride they take to have, you know, a place. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that it's not, I mean, the difficulty of recognizing that as for the example you gave, I think it's because of a certain, that we cannot imagine ourselves as cleaners. I mean, we know we clean, but this is not something we talk about. It will not be part of, you know, because it's not, I mean, glamorous would be too big a word, but it's not, you know, part of it. It's almost, well, of course you're clean, you know, like, it's part of why, you know, what is there to talk about here. But if I say, oh, I wrote an article today, that, you know, people will listen, and that will be, that's, you know, or I have, you know, I've been in a workshop in artwork. Oh, that's good. But if I say I clean my house today, why is she that? Okay, okay. And then, so.
I think also what's important to mention in this regard is this widespread tendency of outsourcing cleaning and guarding. So also alienating these people who work in the museum, let's say, and not giving them some sense of belonging as well, because this is, I think we now almost, I don't know any cultural organizations that still have cleaners and guards as staff members. It's mostly 100% outsourced to kind of, anonymous service, which also invalidates.
It's outsourced, but at the same time, for instance, you could think that some of the other things could be outsourced, but they will be more considered. It would be about, lighting or whatever other things that would be needed, and they will be invited at the table. Cleaning is really connected with dirtiness, but a dirtiness that we don't want to see. So the person is associated with the dirtiness of the work she's doing, and not to the cleanliness that she's producing. But in Russia, do you have a lot of migrants doing this work? For middle class families or for in institution?
In Russia, it's done almost,
middle class.
Exactly. In Russia, it's done almost exclusively by migrants.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is worldwide. The fact in Malaysia, in Indonesia, in the Gulf States, in Europe, Western, Eastern, wherever, in United States, in Canada, in Brazil, the migrant occupy the position. So there is also a connection with, being a migrant and doing that work that has to be invisible and that has to deal with shit, Yeah.
Here, I don't know whether you have still time, but it's true. Then I'm speaking, I'm not Russian, but I've been spending quite a lot of time here. But it's true that there's always this question about Soviet imperialism and how much can we compare it to a colonial relationship with other states. And it's true that it's in debate, right? There are a lot of different positions. So here migration comes mainly from the former Soviet republics as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But they do, yeah. I think there were, I remember, it was years and years ago, and I think it was it still the Soviet Union? I don't know. But there was we had a meeting to which, I participated about a monument, and the comparison was between monument in post-colonial state and in the Soviet Union, rather than in Eastern and Western Europe, blah, 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 blah. But, the kind of, the style, the certain aesthetic to celebrate victory, that could be, and it's not because it was done by Soviet artists in Mozambique or elsewhere. It was a certain aesthetic, and that was very interesting because we got away also of the West-East, opposition. But the fact that effectively the Soviet Union being an empire and therefore drawing about its on its territory, that's a model. It's as soon as you have a certain, as soon as the state is the space of the state is an imperial space, like also in China, you will have internal colonialism, which was also, a notion that was used in the United States, saying the fact that the black people were in fact part of an internal colonialism in the United States. So you had migrants coming from Central America Haiti or the Caribbean, but also you had, in fact, the construction of the internal colony. So the notion of internal colonialism for the state, for instance, could be applied to Soviet Union. So how you produce. So the fact of colonialism has to be, and particularly today, when all empire have fallen, supposedly, how this being worked, how this coloniality is being reproduced, how it's being practiced today is very important. So to see that coloniality, what we call coloniality, rather than just colonialism, is still being a new configuration of that. And how, for instance, if we talk about France, but we could talk also about Great Britain, there will be places, that the organization of even the nation state will be places that will be managed as colonial space, like, the popular neighborhood around Paris or Lyon or Toulouse, or in which the way the state managed them is the way the state was managing colonized population. So, and in which the population are racialized. And the racialization can be even within, white people can be rationalized, like the Irish were rationalized in England, or even people coming from Poland are being rationalized today in the UK. Of course, that rationalization does not, will not have the same violence than against Black or Jews or Muslim. But in the UK, because I work in the UK for a while, the incredible, against Polish people was quite huge, I have to say, and they occupied most, I remember, because going to, being in hotel, a lot of the cleaning women were from Poland in the UK. So this is also something, I discussed once, the way what we talk about Europe is in fact a very small part of Europe. It's, Germany, France, England, and in which the East has also been constructed. For Europe, as a place of a minor place, a little backward. And 18th century literature about that is incredible. The way 18th century traveler will talk about people in Eastern country is similar to the literature that colonial racist literature towards African people. And there are echoes. So this, how colonial rhetoric, vocabulary, and practice circulate is interesting also to see how they come back to Europe.
Well, thank you very much. It was really amazing. I'm sorry, I don't have my camera because my internet is really bad. I don't know whether one participant has a last question. Well, so that I think we will go to the end today. Thank you very much, Françoise. It was really great.
Thank you, Joanna, and thank you, everyone, and thank you to the interpreters. Thank you so much.
Yes,
because
thank you, Oksana.
Yeah, that was a fantastic job. Thank you.
And people are writing in the chat. Thank you very much.
Well,
so
thank
they didn't
you.
Speak,
thank
but
you.
they think.
Thank you. And
thank you
I
very
hope
much.
next time in person.
Yes, please.
I was so excited to come to St. Petersburg. I was so excited. I had all my plan. I knew where I wanted to go and something like that. And so I hope this will be possible one day.
Yes, let's make it possible.
We hope so too. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.